when I hear about airports, potentially shutting down, or they obviously can't sustain this lack of activity, there's no revenue coming in to pay their rent and their fees. This kind of makes me worried about what the future holds for for Canada. Are we going to become fractured physically fractured as a nation if we can't get to one another? Again, am I being alarmist here, Peter?
Well, I think there's no question that there's a reckoning coming. I don't think it's a reckoning that's going to involve shutting down the main airports. I think what has to happen is we need to see a revolution in how airports are owned and managed. The airports aren't going anywhere. I think it's to settle your concerns, but governments are going to have to come to terms with the privatization. And we've seen even just during the current Trudeau administration, airport privatization has come up at least twice. Once with the Emerson report, another time Credit Suisse consultants report. So it's always been out there. Up till now, it's been dismissed as something distasteful for Canadians. But we're going to have to get there. And I think there's still a lot of interest in large institutional investors, pension funds and whatnot.
Of course.
They're interested in buying large transportation infrastructure like airports. So the interest will be there, even though we're in a historically grim time for the air travel industry. We just need someone to step up and admit that the status quo is not working. And I think we're going to get there sooner rather than later, because the airports are just bleeding money right now.
And again, when you say bleeding money, I mean, any revenue they take in, they basically pay their landlord, which is our federal government. So is this kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul? I mean, we're going to have to bail them out, but we're in turn, the government is basically their landlord. So how does that actually work?
Well, I mean, the airports have added another $2.8 billion in debt just in 2021. I realize that billions and trillions sort of lose their meaning in this current era, but you can be certain that if you don't have any revenue, $2.8 billion in new debt is pretty substantial. And that's the thing. If they're borrowing, most of these airports are borrowing on the private market from institutional investors, and they owe the interest when it's due. And if they can't pay because they don't have any revenue, those bond investors, the bondholders, are going to ultimately come to the federal government, because they're the backstop, right, presumably, to all these airports. They're the ultimate owner of the land.
Yes, the buck stops with the taxpayer ultimately.
Yeah.
In your report that you outlined, you suggest that airports have become almost like these cathedrals, that there's almost this competition to build the better and the bigger and the more flashiest, interesting airport. Cody lives in Calgary. There's an example of a recently renovated or added onto airport. Did they do a good job? Was there good accountability with that project? Peter?
No, I mean, that's the problem. One of the key problems with the current Canadian ownership structure for airports is they don't have to earn a profit, and there's no investors to answer to. So yes, they've all tended to gold plate the airports. And Calgary is a classic example, an enormous, very expensive expansion in recent years. It unfortunately just was finished by the time the oil price started to tank. So that was bad luck on their part. But yeah, Calgary has been overbuilt. In 2005, the head of the International Air Travel Association called the Pearson renovations Versailles with boarding bridges, which is always a memorable phrase. But it's another unfortunate consequence of how we run our airports, is that these airport authorities might as well build it as big as possible. There's always another user fee we can tack on to get someone to pay for it. But now, without any user fees coming in, the debt is really starting to mount.